I'd like to move on to, I was sitting down having a little cup of coffee with, we'll have questions and answers at the very end. I see a hand going up. There will be 10-minute question and answers. So we'll get back to you. I see your hand up there. I was sitting down having a coffee, which is one of my hobbies, with Patrick there, and he was, I got a great sense from him that he's got great tips and techniques and tools that can help people for mentally rehearse for success for an interview. So maybe if you would kindly share some of them. So this is before you would go into an interview.
Well, as all the other panel members have said, preparation is key, and knowing your stuff, because that's going to give you some confidence as well. One of the things I often tell people to do is think about the worst possible question that they could be asked, and then prepare an answer for it, so that if the worst possible thing happens, at least you're ready. So that can be useful as well, not just in terms of preparing, but also in terms of just calming your nerves as you go in. I think the thing Dervla and I were talking about was really visualization. It was about trying to imagine yourself in the circumstance and the situation of the interview. And it was about rehearsing that mentally in the days leading up to the interview. And that was about thinking about what you're going to wear, as if you were a sort of fly on the wall, really, and you could see yourself, so that you walk into the room confidently. You keep your shoulders back and you walk confidently, but not sort of hurriedly across to the interview panel. You decide whether you're going to shake hands with them or not, or whether you're going to follow their lead. You think about how you're going to sit in the actual chair, a bit like the relaxation techniques that we did earlier. So it's about planning that in advance. And also there's a thing called neuro-linguistic programming, which is very interesting, and which Deirdre and I talked about, Evelyn and I talked about for a while. And there's techniques in there like triggers. So it's taking up a position in the seat. It's then when you're about to start, it's having a trigger for yourself, like squeezing your finger and thumb together, or squeezing your knee, something that the interview panel aren't going to see. And then just taking a deep breath and thinking, okay, I'm ready for this. And if you can actually imagine that in the days and leading up to the interview and rehearse it over and over, what people tell me is that when they go into the interview, their nerves are calmed because they're doing exactly what they'd planned that they were going to do. They're taking the deep breath, and they also almost have a sense of déjà vu, if you like. So it can be very calming. And I think that people who come back and tell me when I talk about this say that it was extremely helpful to them. So I'd advise people to try it out.
Okay, so they're wonderful tips on how we can mentally rehearse for success and to bring a bit of calm and relaxation in. I was curious when I was preparing for this seminar, would our panel, I'm not asking you to identify yourself, would you know of employers that maybe screen people's social media, maybe their Facebook, their Twitter accounts, or I don't know, their Instagram? I'm sure they can't access your Snapchat. But how important, do you know of employers that maybe do this, and how important is a clean online presence?
As someone who works in the HR profession, my advice to my clients is that you do not screen prospective employees or interview candidates' social media accounts prior to interview or at all, because that's their private life. However, that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And I, from experience, know that on occasion it does happen. And I know that it can have a negative impact on whether you actually get invited to interview, or it can have an influence on whether you get invited for interview or not. So yes, it is absolutely critical that your Facebook page, for example, that the profile picture isn't some political statement that this company that you're applying to doesn't agree with, that it's not in line with their vision or their mission. And also that you, from your perspective, don't give away too much about yourself, because that can influence how a prospective employer would view you as well, and whether you would get invited to interview or not. So my advice is to keep your social media pages privately. You know, the way you can set them private. There was a piece in one of the national papers last week about a professor at Trinity who had gone onto his own personal Facebook page and made comments about the exam techniques and answers of his students. But what he didn't realise was that that his Facebook page was set public, and it's now created a storm. It's all over the national press, and there's an investigation into this guy and his comments on Facebook. So and I know sometimes I set mine to private and then I go back in and it's jumped back to public, so it's important to keep checking it as well. But absolutely, your image and your profile on Facebook is, my profile pictures on Facebook are of mountains and seas and the ocean and things like that.
They're not of a bar in Buncrana.
No. I don't know what the inside of them look like. So.
Okay, so it sounds like really sound advice, you know, to really tidy up our online presence. This takes me on to the interview stage, and this is the perfect opportunity to really showcase your pitch. Interviews often start with "tell me about yourself," or "why should we hire you," or, you know, "what can you bring to the job?" And I suppose as employers, what do you want to hear at this stage that would help secure a position?
And I'm going to go back a little bit further, and I think somebody alluded to it earlier on there. First thing will happen when you go in for an interview is you'll probably shake hands with prospective employer. And it takes me back to a personal experience that I had many years ago when I went and did an interview myself for a company. I actually got the job there afterwards, but I happened to be somewhere, and I can't go into detail, where I had access to my own file and I was fit to read that interview. And the first comment that the interviewer had done, weak handshake. A weak handshake. And for some reason, that has stuck in my mind since. So even to this day, and that's 30 odd years ago, I'm conscious of how I shake hands with a person. And I think it was also a very good point, because if you shake hands and your hand just sits on me, if you're positive with your handshake, then from the outset, you're displaying confidence. You're greeting somebody the way they would like to be greeted. So you sit down then and you start talking. And at that stage, you know, you're probably going to be asked, how did you hear about us? What brings you here today? And these go back to the things that I said earlier on about a little bit of research. And just display confidence. And one thing leads to another.
Thank you, Jim. And I think that's a really good tip there about the handshake, about really giving a firm handshake. And I suppose it's important not to give one that's like a vice grip either. Anyway, so back to that question. What do employers want to hear to secure a position?
Thanks. For me, at an interview, what do I want to hear? What do I want to see? Well, the fact that you're sitting in front of me means that you have your qualification. So I want to see somebody's personality shine through. I want to see somebody, because we work very closely in primary schools, probably same in secondary, as a team. So I want to see somebody who's going to be a team player. I want to see somebody, as I said before, who will get on with the existing staff. I want to see somebody who will use their own initiative. And one of the questions I always ask to see, can I get any kind of a feeling for that, is I would say to you, what do you think you have that will enhance my place of work? What can you bring to us that we may not have? We may have some, but we may. And when people answer you that question, you get a fair idea of the person and how they may fit and what they will be like as either the SNA or the teacher.
Okay, so we're talking about your unique selling point.
Yeah, everybody has a unique selling point. You might be sitting down there thinking to yourself, God, what's mine? But you have it. It's just a matter of thinking about that, because that's one of the things you'll be asked. And it is, in the education system anyway, it is one of the things we would ask. Why should I pick you? Give me one reason. I'm after interviewing X amount. Tell me why you think I should pick you for this job.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Who else?
Martin, I don't know if you... just to say very quickly, I think a key thing for me, a top tip, if you like, is that you need to convince the interview panel about why you're the best person for the job, not why this is the best job for you. And that's crucial. It's a very subtle difference, But lots of times when people think about applying for a job, their initial response, their initial motivation is, well, what's in it for me? So why is this the best job for me? And that can often colour their thinking going into an interview. What you've actually got to do when you're sitting in front of the interview panel is convince them why you're the best person to do the job that they have. So I would say really focus on that. Quite often, those two worlds collide, and that's a perfect match, and that's great. But the interview board aren't there to provide you with the best job. They're there to find the best job for their company.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And that's very interesting, to showcase what you can bring to the table and how you are the best person for the job. Now, Martin, I'm going to move on to another question for you. And I hear that these days employers are hiring for attitude. And throughout an interview, maybe could you give me an indication of what kind of attitude you'd want to see throughout an interview?
Well, you're right there when you say about recruiting on attitude. Like, attitude's nearly number one. If the attitude's right, nearly and my line on it, nearly everything else can be taught. Attitude has to be positive, friendly. For us, obviously, customer focused and commercial. They'd be the big things we'd be looking for.
Yeah. So you'd be looking for somebody who's friendly. So if somebody came in to you, what would you want to see in front of you?
Just saying a good kind of positive energy. Really, that's what you're after. What I said there. What does an employer want to hear in an interview? It's not so much what you want to hear. It's not the what, but the how. You know what I mean? It's how it's delivered and how you come across. That's the most important thing.
So how is key?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Lynn, would you like to give any add-on there?
I would absolutely concur with what Martin has said, that it's attitude, and if you've got the attitude, you can train the skill. With one of the clients I work with, we had a recruitment open day recently. We had 90 people come through the doors on a Saturday afternoon, and that was one thing that was particularly evident on that day, that there were people coming through the door that didn't have the experience in the industry. However, they totally fitted the bill for what the company's vision was around: style, sophistication, iconic. It was about being a host. So if you're being a host, whether it be in the retail industry or another industry, it's all about being friendly, listening and delivering. And there were people that came through the door that had loads of experience in the industry, but they didn't have the attitude. They didn't fit with the vision of the company. And there were people came through the door that were maybe around for the summer or in college or coming out of school, and they had, as Martin said, the energy and the attitude. And they're the people, because we can train the skill, we've got the attitude.
Fantastic. So it's all about energy, it's all about attitude, it's all about positivity. That's fantastic. Yes.
I would like to agree with what both have said there earlier on, because I'll come at it from a different perspective. Lynn earlier on spoke about job descriptions and this type of thing, and you'll predominantly find that in the public service jobs. But if you move back into the private sector, and I'd say Martin would agree with me here, very often a job is advertised, you go for the job, and definitely if your attitude is right and your approach is right, and you may not be the right person for that job, but prospective interviewer may see in you skills that he may need or they may need for another type of job. Or they may be looking at, whereas in the past they had 6 people employed in an office or in a building, whatever, to do 6 sets of skills. And now they're trying to streamline, become more competitive. They may now want to rearrange all those job descriptions and let 5 people do it. So there's an element of multitasking in it. And the set of skills maybe that were advertised, while they're needed, they may able to identify another set of skills that they could use elsewhere. And another job may come up, or they may just decide to take you on because your attitude is right and they know that you can slot in and fit in with their overall goals within the company.
So, I mean, Jim's talking there about flexibility. It's about being flexible with your attitude, and that you can learn other skills, or you can pick up other posts. And you probably, Jim is from Ferrum Engineering, Donegal Town, and you can see his lovely work in the new credit union in the parish centre. It's a lovely addition to the town.